Okay, guys, welcome to factoring day 2. We are going to finish up our foldable, and you want to make sure that you glue it or tape it into your notebook so that you don't lose it. All right, let's get started. So pause a minute if you haven't gotten these tabs written down. If not, let's keep going. All right, we have trinomial factoring. Trinomial factoring means we have a trinomial. That means we have 3 terms. 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms. Okay, so once we have and we are able to identify that we have 3 terms, then we can do what's called the AC method. And the AC method's really cool because it turns it into a grouping problem. And we did grouping problems yesterday. So the first thing you do is you have to identify what A is and what C is. Well, A is always the number in front of the variable. So that's A. 1 is A. Then C is always the constant. It never has a variable. So A times C. Okay, 1 times negative 16, negative 16. Now you're trying to find 2 factors of negative 16 that when you add them together, they'll add up to be that middle term, this middle term right here, negative 6x. So we want 2 numbers that multiply to make negative 16, but add up to be negative 6. Well, that would be negative 8 and positive 2. And so what you do is you rewrite this as a 4-term grouping problem. And then we do it just like we did yesterday. Piece of cake. So bring down the first term, x squared. Take this middle term and replace it with your 2 new terms. You got a negative 8 and you got a positive 2, but we're going to put x's on there so that when we do add them up, they do become a negative 6x. And then we bring the last term down, which is negative 16. Now looky there, we've got 4 terms. Oh, that reminds me of the grouping problem. So we make 4 squares and we put them in our 4 squares. X squared, upper left, negative 8, upper right, plus 2x, lower left, negative 16, lower right. And now we take each column in each row and we factor it. First row, they have an x in common. Bottom row, they have a 2 in common. First column, they have an x in common. Second column, they have a negative 8. And so the 2 factors of this trinomial are x minus 8 and x plus 2. Okay, now if we remultiplied those, just like I showed you how to multiply 2 binomials yesterday, they would double distribute to get back to x squared minus 6x minus 16. And so now we're going to do example number 2. We got to identify our A. 3 is our A. 2 is our C. Multiply those together. You get negative 6. 2 factors of negative 6 that add up to be a 1x. A 1. So 2 factors of negative 6 that make 1. That would be 3 and negative 2. Now, we rewrite the first term. We take our middle term and we get rid of it. And we replace it with plus 3x minus 2x. And then we bring down the last term, which is minus 2. And so then what we do is we go ahead and make a square. Okay, make your square. And then that is 3x squared plus 3x minus 2x minus 2. And now we go ahead and group greatest common factor, the top row. They have a 3x in common. Greatest common factor, the bottom. They have a negative 2 in common. First column, there's an x. Second column, it's a 1. If x times 3x makes 3x squared, we did a good job. Yes, 3x times 1 is 3x. X times negative 2, negative 2x. 1 times negative 2, negative 2. We did a perfect job. So then our factors are x plus 1 and 3x minus 2. All right. So now we're going to do one more problem. So hopefully you have enough room. If not, put it on the top part of your flap here. And we're going to do one more. All right. So example number 3, AC method. 2 is my A. 10 is my C. 2 times 10, 20. 2 factors of 20 that add up to be negative 9. Well, two numbers that make negative would be a positive and a negative. But I see I have a positive 20 here. So I probably need two numbers that when I multiply them, they both become positive. So two negatives make a positive. Yes, that's right, folks. Two negatives make a positive. Two negative numbers that make negative 9, that would be negative 5 and negative 4. All right, rewrite this as a four-term problem. 2x squared. Bring that down. Replace your middle term with our new terms. Negative 5x minus 4x. Bring down that c plus 10. Now, rewrite in your four squares. Okay, 2x squared minus 5x minus 4x plus 10. Okay, what do the first two have in first row have in common? Yes, they have an x in common. What does the second row have in common? They have a negative 2. First column, they have a 2x. Second column, negative 5. Oh, x times 2x, 2x squared. X times negative 5, negative 5x. Negative 2 times 2x, negative 4x. Negative 2 times negative 5, oh, that is a positive 10. So our two factors must be 2x minus 5 times x minus 2. All right, that ends AC method. Okay, let's move on to the last method. All right, so now the last method that we're going to learn in chapter 4 is identify difference of two perfect squares. So there's a couple things that we need to talk about here. First, you must identify if you have a difference. That means you're subtracting, okay? So make sure you look for subtraction. If it's 2 and there's not a subtraction, it is not a difference. They need to be two perfect squares. Do you guys remember your perfect squares? Well, 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16, 5 times 5, 25, 6 squared, 36, 49, 64, 81. I'm helping you out here. Hopefully you're remembering them and recalling. 10 squared is 100, 11 squared, 121, 12, 144, 13, 169, 14, 196, 15, 225. Okay, so those are the first 15 perfect squares. So we use that to break this into two factors. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is we have an x squared. What times what gives me x squared? Well, you got it, an x. Okay, and another x. All right, what times what gives me 16? Well, 16 perfect square is 4 and 4. But these need to be opposite in sign. The reason why they need to be opposite in sign is because we need to get a negative 16. In order to get a negative 16, we need negative 4 times positive 4, giving us a negative 16. Plus, if you notice, there is no b term, which means my b term needs to cancel. So if my b term is going to cancel, let's show you here that B term canceling. That's this little nose and this little mouth. 4x and negative 4x, oh, they cancel out to make a 0b term, and that's what we're looking for. So if you can do that, you know you've got the right problem or the right answer here. So let's go ahead and do the next one. What times what gives me 4? Well, 2. So I have a 2 and a 2. What times what gives me x squared? Well, that would be x and another x. What times what gives me 9? That would be 3 and 3. So then 1 needs to be negative, 1 needs to be positive. That'll give me a negative 9. And then if I check my middle term, I'll get a negative 6x and a positive 6x, which will cancel out my middle term. Okay, looking at number 3, 16x squared minus 25. What times what is 16? Well, you got it, 4 and 4. What times what is x squared? You got it, x and x. All right, now what times what gives me 25? Well, 5 and 5. One has to be a positive, one has to be a negative. That's the difference of two squares. All right, now let's look at example number 4. What times what gives me 4? Well, that'd be a 2. What times what gives me x squared? That'd be an x and an x. Oh, what times what gives me 7? 7's not on my list. All right, so, oops, sorry about that. 7's not on my list. So if it's not on my list, then it is not a perfect square. Then this is not factorable. So that's all we have today is the difference of two squares. All right. Oops, that should not have erased. I'm sorry. Not factorable. Alrighty, so that's it, and we'll see you tomorrow.